All right, welcome to the From the Ground Up Community Garden. Are y'all new here? Have you ever been? The three of y'all? You have? Okay. Oh, I can't see. I was like, I know that it is, but the hat, I just can't tell. That's the problem with winter, Like winter clothes just kind of disguise people. It's very odd and interesting. But anyway, here we go with the Story Slam. And we lost a bit of momentum having to reschedule, but that is the nature of things. And we're carrying on. And, I read a book by Bill Graham last year. He was the famous concert promoter and Grateful Dead, Janis Joplin, Jefferson Airplane. I mean, pretty much anybody you can think of back in the day, he either promoted, came in contact with, or had them at his venue. One of them, one of the Fillmores, either New York or San Francisco. Anyway, it's very inspiring to read just in terms of learning his story, but in particular with a situation like this, because he promoted concerts and had some really, really famous concert venues, and then promoted huge festivals, some of the first ones, and including Woodstock. And so he always gave 100% to everything he did, no matter what it was or how many people showed up. And that's kind of our mentality here as well, too. Elizabeth's like halfway through the book, but she stopped reading it probably 6 months ago. And she's got like 10 books stacked on top of it right now. But nonetheless, it's so that's kind of how I feel as we go through and light all the tiki torches and set up the sound and everything. Doesn't matter who shows up, even if one person. It's like we're committed to the event and give it 100% and making it a great experience, if only for us, because we love being here. So anyway, From the Ground Up Community Garden. So just to kind of reiterate, this is sustained by Innisfree Hotels. This is a part of their corporate social responsibility program. There is a part of Innisfree Hotels called The Hive, which they are the community outreach, the corporate social responsibility, and we are one of the projects, right? Project, you call it? Yeah? Okay. Yeah. So we got five goals here. The first one, the objectives, first is community. First and foremost is community, bringing community together. The second is education. Elizabeth is a 20-year educator, highly acclaimed and award-winning nationally, statewide, and locally in South Florida. I'm not kidding. She's been flown to Washington, D.C. and given awards, and it's really stunning. PACE Award winner last year. I know you would never say this stuff. Next is organic gardening. That's our next mission. And visual and performing arts. Obviously, that's a part of where we're here. And then the last wraps back around, as she says, to the first one, which is community. Elizabeth is here. She's the lead gardener. This is my cousin Andrew over here. He is the assistant gardener, and they're here about 20 hours a week. And right now, Tuesday and Friday mornings, Wednesday and Thursday evenings, but get on Facebook to find out specific days and times because, as you know, the weather can dictate a lot of life lately. So, school groups, community service hours, lots of those groups come out. So if you know of any that need projects, do bring them. And we've got a portalet that's open right behind the container, right over here. I saw the lock off the door, so it's open. If you want like a really, really nice one, go to the police station across the street. This one's actually the cleanest one you'll probably ever go into. So we also have some merchandise over here for sale. Blankets on this cold, wintry night. Those are nice fleece blankets, and they look good too. Koozies and different things like that. And we're doing, the mugs. One right there, and some beverages and snacks, whatever you want. So anyhow, thanks everybody for coming, and I'm going to now introduce our host for the evening, Becca. If I could say your last name, I would gladly just yell it out, but I've tried before and I did it wrong. Can you say it? Yeah. Fritchley. Becca Fritchley, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
So when my husband and I were dating, I don't remember what sparked the conversation, but he said, now my last name has 9 letters in it. And 5 of them are consonants squished right up against each other. Just like so. And whenever you call in someplace, they want your name. So I'm always like, Becca. And they said, and your last name? I was like, can we just Becca? And no, we need your last name. Okay, I'm going to spell it. F is in Frodo. R is in Rivendell. I is in Isengard. I can do the whole thing with Tolkien references. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, so super excited to be here tonight, and just wanted to go over some of the rules with everybody. And so do we have any people who have already determined in their hearts that they're going to be telling us a story tonight? Rob is. Andrew and Sarah. I'm kidding. Yes. Usually, and this is so low key, people really get story ideas while other people are telling stories, and then you can just run up and tell a story. But we need you to sign the sheet. Yeah. Because we're recording and you... Yeah. And there are some rules along with it. So you can't read it from a device, can't read it from your phone or an iPad or anything like that. It has to be true. Those are the two things I know right offhand. Your own personal story. It can't be somebody else's true story. Yes. Oh, yeah. I wasn't even there yet. Yeah. So it's a 5-minute time limit. They need to stay within the theme, and tonight's theme is growing freedom. So if you have something, and that is so loose. I mean, it's not like if you're not talking about growing a freedom tree, you'll be disqualified. That's not it. Is Chastity here? All right. Oh, you're Chastity. Okay. I was like, wait, where's our judge? 5-minute time limit, and no hate talk, discrimination, strong vested opinions, or preaching. Like, don't get up here, and even if we all agree with you, it's hard to hear vitriolic language. So let's try to stay away from that. Okay. And anything else before I introduce Scott? No? Okay. Our guest speaker, storyteller tonight is Scott Satterwhite. Oh, sorry. Oh. Yeah, paper thoughts are for people who don't care to get up here, and what I'll do is read whatever you write down on the little slip of paper, and usually it's something that goes along with the theme for the night, growing and freedom, or growing freedom. I saw some. They're back there. Chastity has them. I'm falling. Oh, gosh. I almost... So I'm going back to the exact position that I just fell out of. Yeah, paper thoughts. And last month I badgered people trying to get them to tell me who wrote the paper thoughts, and then found out they're supposed to be anonymous. So I won't do that this month. But anyway, so Scott is here. He is our main storyteller tonight. Super excited to have him here. Scott has a very artistic family, community-oriented. Met his son last year. Very talented little guy. Don't tell him I call him a little guy. I don't know. But I'm just going to read. So Scott teaches English at the University of West Florida, the writer for Inweekly, and a published poet. So, and this is interesting because my husband's been going to open books for, when did you? 2000. He's been going at least since 2000, when you guys used to be right off Palafox. Oh, Warrington? Oh, I forgot about you guys being in Warrington, right there by the hardware store, right?
Yeah, and we were with the subterranean.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking of as subterranean. Okay. So yeah, my husband is a long-time bookstore aficionado, and then when you guys open, he's like, we go there all the time now. But so it's a prison book project, and I'm going to let you explain that a little better whenever you come up, if you don't mind, because I don't know. I know kind of what you do, but not well enough to explain it to everybody else. So let you do that. Joined the Navy in 1989 and served with the 3rd Marine Division and the 2nd Marine Division as a Navy corpsman. Holds a Master of Arts in History and English and lives in Pensacola with Lauren and his 2 children. So we're excited to have you here. Everybody give Mr. Satterwhite a nice round of applause. Do you want this?
Hello. Okay. Hey, Open Books is right around the corner over here. Actually, it's only about a couple blocks from here. It's on Guillemard Street, which is that street that's right over there. At this moment, where the bookstore is holding a packing session where they pack books that are sent to people in prison. We're an all volunteer run store, and all the money that's made in the store goes to pay for postage for books to send to people in prison. And what they do is they just write us letters asking us for books, and then we send it to them. So it's kind of like Amazon, except for much slower. And there's a really good chance you're not going to get anything close to what you want, but but we have good intentions. So which also might be like Amazon. The prison books? Oh no, we started it. It was based in my bedroom, for a long time. Yeah, I started it. Had a house. Used to live in the house around the corner. There are a number of them that are around. So there's a bunch of them that focus on national. We send to people in Florida because that's all we can handle. And if you come in there and take a look whenever the mail comes, we get probably around at least a dozen, if not 2 dozen a day, letters. So it's easily 100 or so a week, sometimes. So it could be quite a bit. I don't know if my math added up as I'm saying that out loud. I'm trying to do the math. Is that 100? But anyway, we get a lot of letters. And that's all we can handle. If we were to take any other states, much less the rest of the country, we wouldn't be able to handle it. But you can't lock up so many people and then, not have a lot of customers, so. Yeah, anyway, I can go on about that, but let's talk about this. So the background for this is I was part of this thing called the Telling Project, and we did 2 performances this week, and then we did this other performance in 2015. And how these stories were cultivated was they had interviewed, they'd done a big shout out to all these veterans asking for interviews. And when they did the shout out for the interviews, then I went in there and I did one at the behest of my wife. Went in, did one of the interviews, and had somebody interview you for about 2 hours. And then after the process, they chose 6 out of, I think, 10, 15 people. I was one of the 6 that they chose. And then from our interviews, they created a script for us. So if you go online, you want to take a look at what the whole thing looks like. That might be more interesting than what I'm going to do. But it is 6 people is the version online. That's from 2015. And they tell lots of different stories from the Vietnam War, from the Iraq War, peacetime stories. They're pretty hard stories to hear. I mean, not only of death and war, but sexual assault, and a lot of pretty rough stories. But they're also pretty not uncommon veteran stories. So it's worth your time if you want to take a look at it. You'll see my version, so you can just skip ahead, from those. And what I've done with this is I've just kind of pieced together my version of this, and I've done this once or twice before, so I think it'll work. So anyway, we'll just start off. Okay. And I normally do this without a mic or something, but it's better to do this with a mic, or I should say I have a mic and it's stuck to me. All right, so we'll see how this works. I joined the Navy in 1989 on the delayed entry program. I went to boot camp in 1990, 6 days after I graduated from high school. So why did I join? So why did I join? Maybe it was because where I grew up, South Texas. Mexican-American culture has such a strong affinity with the military. You walk into just about anybody's house, and there's almost always a picture of some military person, some veteran hanging up on the wall. Maybe it's because everybody seemed to love veterans over there, and it's partially because almost everybody was a veteran. Maybe it's because military service ran far back into my family, all the way back to the Civil War, further even. Both my dad and my stepfather were in the Navy. In fact, during the Vietnam War, my dad did the same thing I did when I was in the Navy. He was a corpsman. I'm sure in retrospect that played some role in it, in me joining. My dad joined the Navy in 1970 to avoid being drafted by the Army. He He had a hard time readjusting to civilian life. And he left my family when I was 8 years old. That left us dirt poor. So by the time I went to high school, I was definitely in the lower class. The idea of paying for school, paying for college just seemed ludicrous to me. And Texas was hot, really hot. So in our house, we didn't have air conditioning. So when the recruiters would come into our classes and they would talk to us about how the Navy has air conditioning, I remember thinking, that would be cool, literally. So it was a combination of things that led me to join. But I wasn't alone. Nearly 40% of my graduating class joined the military. In a world without structure. It was something bigger. So I went to boot camp in Great Lakes, Illinois. We flew into Chicago. This guy picks us up from the airport. Really nice guy. He's pointing out all the sights in the city, asking us how we're doing, telling us about the Navy, asking us what's going on, just really nice. And then we get to the barracks. As soon as we get to the barracks, the mood changed. He's pointing out our racks, telling us where we're going to sleep. Everybody's walking around, a little disoriented, a little lost, a little homesick. And then around 10, 11 o'clock, it's lights out. Everyone goes to bed. Then about 2 in the morning, this maniac comes running in the room, banging on trash cans. Wake the fuck up! Wake the ice cream. You can hear it through the neighborhood. But imagine trash cans banging, okay? All right, metal trash cans. Wake up, wake up. Everybody jumps out of bed. Now I'm thinking, what the hell did I just get myself into? One of the biggest memories that I have from boot camp is how we were all thirsting for information. I mean, we could get letters from the outside, but for some reason they wouldn't let us see newspapers. They wouldn't let us read any newspapers. So all these rumors would do the rounds. The biggest rumor that was going around was that the entire economy had collapsed, and one of the richest men in the country, Donald Trump, had jumped from a building and killed himself. Yeah, remember, this is 2015. That's when I did the interview. I'm sorry, I did the interview in 2015, so it was before he was famous, right? Anyway. But remember, this is 1990. What was actually taking place was the build-up to the Gulf War. The same day I graduated from boot camp was the same day Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait. It was also the same day I got my very first Navy paycheck, $800. I remember looking at that paycheck and thinking, what the hell am I going to do with all this money? So, of course, got wasted. We went to Chicago, and I got so drunk. So I'm out in Chicago, my navy white sailor suit, drunk off my ass in the parking lot of the Rock and Roll McDonald's, a real place. And all these people kept coming up to us. And they're asking us, you going to go over to Iraq and kick that guy's ass? You going to go to the war and kick that guy's ass? I'm like, yeah, I guess, sure. I mean, I didn't know what was going on. None of us did. So I joined the Navy to become a corpsman, which is like a medic. So I joined the Navy to become a corpsman, and even though you're still in the Navy, you end up going almost everywhere with the Marines. So after I finished my medical training over in Great Lakes, they sent us over to Camp Pendleton, California for field medical school, combat medical school, really, where we learned how to go on field maneuvers, learn how to shoot M16s, how to wear gas masks, how to pack our packs. And we were always marching, all the time. Dozen-mile humps we were doing dozen-mile humps almost all the time, marching nearly every day. Marching. I mean, the Navy's restrictive, but the Marines, they take it to a new level. At this time, war was imminent. We knew we were going. And Saddam Hussein had all these chemical weapons. He'd used them already against the Iranians during the Iran-Iraq War, and he had also used them against the Kurds just a couple years before. They were telling us that if he was pushed into a corner, then he was going to use them on us as a last resort. So we were always trying to get prepared. Our instructors were giving us these drills all the time. They just yell, gas, gas, gas. And you have to take off your gas mask, put it on your head, take a deep breath. Some scary stuff. A lot of our instructors were Vietnam veterans too. They tell us about the rules of war and how corpsmen, even though they're fall under the Geneva Convention, are technically non-combatants. It depends on the situation. The Viet Cong didn't care about the rules of war. They targeted the corpsmen first. They knew that if they took out the officers, leadership's gone. If they took out the radiomen, communication's gone. If they take out the corpsmen, everyone's dead. So you better pay attention. You're the number one target. You think I'd be a little more afraid than I was, but to be honest, I wanted to go. I wanted to be a part of it. I remember watching all those movies in the 80s, the war movies, Rambo, Platoon, Full Metal Jacket. MASH was a TV show that was on almost every night when I went to bed. Is Hollywood war all the time, which I understand is a little different than the real thing. There's also a part of me that was saying, you could die over there. I remember being 18 years old and writing my will, and that's a weird feeling. I had a little letter that I used to keep in my pocket, and it was written to a girlfriend back home. I remember wondering what it would be like for her when she found out I was killed in a gas attack over in Saudi Arabia. To think about now, but that was what was going on in my head then. So, the invasion begins. So the invasion begins, and they tell us that as soon as we get to our next duty station, that we're going to be told we are going to we're going to check in, and then from there we're going to go to Camp Lejeune to go with the Marines, and then from there we're going to go to the war for the duration, over in Saudi Arabia, and then eventually to Iraq. So they tell us as soon as we get to our next duty station that we are going to check in over there and then go sentence over to the Marines over in Camp Lejeune, and then from there we're going to go straight over to the war, and we'll be there for the duration over in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, or Iraq. But as soon as I get to my next duty station, and I turn on the TV over at Bethesda Naval Hospital, turn on the TV, and I see the Iraqis are surrendering. They're surrendering to the Army, surrendering to the Marines, even surrendering to CNN. The war was over. They told us to keep our bags packed, be ready to go at a moment's notice, but they just never called. So, about a year or so later, I leave Bethesda Naval Hospital, and I go to the 3rd Marine Division. I was an instructor at the Marine Corps' Jungle Warfare Training Center. We're on top of this mountain, Mount E.Eubanks in Okinawa, Japan. 37 Marines, another corpsman, a couple stray dogs that we adopted, and me, Doc Satterwhite. So the Marines, they treat the Navy guys just a little bit differently. So let me tell you 2 stories about that. First story. So we're always going on these patrols, always going into the jungles. It's kind of like those Vietnam movies, except no one's trying to kill us. All right, so we're going into the jungles. Everybody has machine guns, and we're marching by the side of this cliff. It's about 1992. My staff sergeant, this guy we call Beetlejuice, because he had a big body and a little head. So Staff Sergeant Beetlejuice is grumbling about the recent elections. Bill Clinton's going to let all these gays in the military. I'm serious. Who in the fuck would vote for Bill Clinton? I'm serious. He's going to let all these gays in the military. Who in the fuck would vote for Bill Clinton? Really? Who in the fuck would vote for Bill Clinton? So remember, we're on the side of this cliff. Everyone has machine guns. And then somebody says, Doc did. Everyone stops and looks at me. Staff Sergeant Beetlejuice looks at me too. You voted for Bill Clinton? Yes, Staff Sergeant. You voted for Bill Clinton? Yes, Staff Sergeant. Seriously? Yes, Staff Sergeant. Are you gay? No, I don't think so. I mean, who would come out of the closet at a moment like that? So Staff Sergeant, Beetlejuice starts speaking up. All right, if I find out any of you guys are queers, I'm going to throw you guys right off that cliff. You hear me? I'm going to throw you guys right off that cliff if I find out any of you guys are queers. Everybody's silent, still looking at me. And luckily, one of my sergeants spoke up. Hey, yo, Staff Sergeant, I voted for Bill Clinton, too. Ah, damn, you voted for Bill Clinton? I expected it from the Navy guy. I didn't expect it from you. Then Beetlejuice grumbled the whole way home. Second story. I don't know if this is still allowed or not. But in the military, when you go up in rank, especially into the NCO ranks, then there's usually some kind of ceremony that goes along with it, and then often a hazing ceremony. In the Navy, you get stripes on one arm, And then everybody of that rank or higher, once you get above NCO, which is E4, they hit you as hard as they can, hard as they want to, on that arm. Okay, and that's called tacking on your stripes. I hit you, shake your hands. So that's tacking on your stripes. Not too bad. The Marines, of course, take it to another level. Marines have stripes not only on one arm, but two. And they have this red stripe that goes down the side of their pants on the dress blues. And that stripe's called the blood stripe. So when you're a corpsman with the Marines, if you want them to respect you, you have to go where they go and do what they do. That said, I still think I caught them by surprise when I agreed to go through the ceremony, go through the gauntlet. So after they put on my stripes, then I stand there prepared, and two of my sergeants grab both my arms. And then they hit me as hard as they can on both arms. And then at the same time, they kneed me as hard as they could in my thigh. I was expecting this one. I wasn't expecting this one. And then I go through the gauntlet. I go through a couple dozen people all hitting me, kneeing me, hitting me, kneeing me as hard as they could in my arms and legs. I get to the very end. I could barely walk. It was like a gang initiation, almost pretty close to it. A bunch of train killers, just beating the hell out of me. So I get to the end. I could barely walk. And then, I get to the end. I could barely walk. It's one of the worst beatings I ever got in my life. So a couple days later, I'm going on a run with my unit. So we're going on the run, and I look down on my legs, and my leg just turned black all the way on the side. And I was like, what the hell is that? Then my medical training kicked in. I said, oh, I know what that is. That's the blood from my muscles coming to the surface. And I looked down, and everything was black and blue. And I realized, that's my blood stripe. And it sucked. But at the same time, I was thinking, I just got initiated into the Marines and just got hazed into the Marines. They started calling me Marine after that. At that point now, I started to feel like I was one of them. And I have to admit that it felt pretty good. It's definitely a masculinity thing. It was an intense year being stuck up on that mountain over in Okinawa. Mount E.Eubanks, Okinawa, Japan. So after I leave Okinawa, I'm sent over to 2nd Marine Division, 2nd Combat Engineer Battalion, 2nd Marine Division. And even though I was still with the Marines, the camaraderie that I had over in Okinawa was gone. I just didn't feel it anymore over there. So once I was done with my tour, coming up on the end, 2 years, I put in for a new duty station. I figured I wanted to go to school. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to be there anymore. So I put in for a school. And I put in for aerospace medical technician, aerospace physiology technician school in Pensacola, Florida. And I got it. I got accepted. So I'm in school, about ready to graduate. And right towards the end, they give you this thing called a dream sheet. And dream sheet, you have to list 3 places where you want to go, your dream locations. I want to go to the West Coast, so I chose San Diego, San Francisco, Seattle. Imagine my surprise when I opened my orders. Pensacola, Florida. Like, y'all didn't even try. But I was looking at the orders and thinking, these are 5-year orders. I kind of like Pensacola, but I'm not sure if I could stick it out for 5 years over here. But turns out I ended up meeting a lot of people on base and a lot of people off base. Got connected with the punk scene. And then on March 1st, 1999, I got out of the Navy. And even though I didn't have any connections at all to Florida, no family over here in Pensacola, I decided to stick around. So when I was in the Navy, I gravitated towards the intellectuals. And they were always there no matter where I was. And when I was with the Marines, just by chance, a lot of my roommates were either anarchists, punks, socially conscious people willing to stand up. So in a weird way, you could say that it was the military that drove me to punk. Not so much the music that a lot of my friends were listening to, but really the anti-establishment culture that has almost always been a part of the lower enlisted ranks. So when I got out, I moved into this big punk house. It's a place called 309, which is right around the corner over there. So I moved into this house called 309. About half a dozen roommates when I first moved in, all punks. Over the years, I lived there about 8 years, probably had about 50 to 75 people living in that house at various times. Not at once, of course, but just periods. About 50 to 75 roommates over the years. For the first 2 years after I got out, I tried my best to avoid working at any cost. And I was able to do that mostly for about 2 years. I lived off my unemployment for a little while. I lived off my severance check. When all that stuff ran out, then I did odd jobs here and there. I sold plasma. I did that for a lot. Essentially my job for quite a while. Then I wrote music reviews, and when I get the music reviews or when I get the CDs, and I take those over to Tom's Records. I don't know if y'all know where that is or not, but I get to take it to Tom, and Tom would give me $4 each for each one, and then that would be my rent. Cheap rent. A lot of my roommates were dumpster divers too, and Americans throw away a lot of perfectly good food. Y'all probably know that. Americans throw away a lot of perfectly good food, so we'd have these elaborate feasts all the time, built off of the dumpsters of all the local grocery stores around here. Funny thing is, when I was living at the house, I had two roommates in particular, a guy named Rimo D, another guy named Todd X. Both of them were veterans, and even though that was a big part of our lives, that was something none of us ever talked about. In retrospect, I didn't think of that transition as being really awkward or really strange, but it was just so different than what most of my other friends went through. So when my daughter was born in 2005, with the help of my wife, I decided to go back to college. Go to college, actually. And I used the GI Bill to the fullest extent, and I went back and got my master. I eventually got my master's degree in American history and English literature. So one day, I'm at this graduation ceremony, and the keynote speaker is this general in the Army. Everybody's in their full regalia, the cap and gown. First time I'm in a uniform since I got out of the military. So the general, he's giving the speech, talking about military service, talking about veterans issues, talking about service to country. And then he asked the audience, how many of you out in the crowds are veterans? If you're out there, please stand up and be recognized. And all these people stood up. Everybody clapped and applauded. Then he looks back at the faculty. How many of you, esteemed faculty, are veterans? I stand up, and this other guy across the room stands up too, Vietnam veteran. And I remember thinking, really? All of us? Out of all of us? Just two? That's it? But it made sense. They were professors. When we were joining the military, they were in college. When we were all of military age, they were doing what I probably should have done, what my friends probably should have done too, but none of us did. When they went to school, we enlisted. And that experience was pretty enlightening for me to see this at that ceremony, to be able to look around and see that of all these people, just two of us had served in the military. It helped me to understand why so many people didn't understand or didn't get it. And not in a bad way, it's just that our experiences of life were just so different. Our experiences of youth were just so different from each other. But thinking back on that and looking at that moment, understanding that only a few people, in that room had served from all those people, that still, it made a profound impact on me. And looking back at that moment and just thinking that that moment I was an exception and it felt awkward. So looking back around and just thinking of all of us, just two. Really? So when people ask me now, how do you feel about your service? I really don't know. One of the most awkward moments for me is when people thank me for my service, because I really don't know what to say to that. I appreciate it, and I'm thankful, for people thanking me. I take the 10% discount, whenever it comes up, but otherwise I never know really where to put it. I'm in a different mindset now than I was back then. Would I join again? I'm not 100% sure if I would. If my daughter signed up or wanted to sign up, would I sign for her? And I don't know if I would. In fact, I know I wouldn't sign for her to join. She could do it on her own if she wanted to. But I was thinking that was my phone. That's the clock, right? I was like, did I not turn that thing off? I threw my thing off. Yeah. So would I do it again? I'm not sure. But that said, it's a part of me, and it's a part of me that is just what it is. So the whole experience overall, is it good or bad? It's a combination of some. I'm giving you a couple snippets of the overall story. There's a lot more stories, but those are just parts of it. But again, it's who I am now. So I was Scott Satterwhite, United States Navy. Now I'm Scott Satterwhite, Veteran for Peace. Thanks. Thanks. Everything except for the last part after I got coffee was the script, and that's when I started making stuff up.
No, that was
With
awesome.
my final.
Scott, I don't remember if we have hashed through this before, but when you were talking about the anarchists and everything, I remembered where we had first met. Okay, so so the police, no. Oh, and the moon is gorgeous. If anybody wants to turn around and see it. Yeah, show some appreciation over there. And I was thinking when you were, yeah, I was like, oh, that was it. That's how James knows him. When you were serving in the military, I was a theater kid in college, and that's funny, like our different paths. But we both made it to Pensacola and ended up on a soccer field together. I was, like I said, former theater kid here going to a school of ministry, and showed up when James took me to an anarchist soccer game. And that was what they called it. I stopped playing the day I got kicked in the face with the soccer ball. A professional showed up. And I remember I tried to block him, and he kneed the ball and hit me in the face, and I fell over backwards, and he never came back again. He felt so... Right? There are no rules, except could you touch the ball? I think you could even touch it with your hands. I mean, some people actually knew how to play, and then I was there. But we used to play at where the Veterans Park is now. It used to be this swampy field. Yes, and now it's this gorgeous park. It's so different. What? It's beautiful. It was pretty before, except it was very wet. We played in the park that's the retaining pond now. That was where we played. And so that's funny. We go back about 17 years then. Longer. Yeah. So that was good. So who's next to tell a story? Rob is next. Don't forget, it's open if anything has given you food for thought, or you want to do a paper thought or anything like that.
Well, we do have paper thoughts in there.
Oh, do you want me to read a paper? Oh, right here. I'll just read one since we don't have a lot. Oh, this is awesome. I was about to ask the person that I think wrote this, did you write this? Did you see it on my face? No. Freedom is being your authentic self. That's fabulous. And that's a lot like what you were just talking about. Being your authentic self, whether it's an anarchist soccer player or a military professional or what? Multifaceted, yeah. And some stuff comes and goes, like you stop doing it for a season and then all of a sudden it comes back and you're like, whoa, what's that? So that's great. Freedom is being your authentic self. Oh my goodness. I know what I'm doing, guys. So our next speaker is Rob Eubanks. Rob is a 6 foot... Rob is a 6'3" actor on screen and stage. Shall I continue?
Thank you, Becca. That was so beautiful and moving. All right. Give me a second. Don't start the timer yet. All right, so story slammers. So we have our guest speaker guest speakers aren't limited to time, obviously. So we don't, because that's what we did last time too. It's just but right. So the slam starts now, which is 5 minutes or less. And so I'm going to hear a ding at like 4:30, right? That's fine. Then I'll stick to. I'm pretty good with time, so I'm good with that. Yeah. Well, see, now she's got the bell, so she is going to ding me. Just because I bet 2 minutes in you're going to hear that. And if nobody else tells a story, that means I'm the grand prize winner. And that's not good because I'm like affiliated with the garden. So we need, All right. Growing freedom. So growing freedom for me is, let me start with 1984. I think it was not around 1984. I was 12 years old, and my first trip out of the country was to a Caribbean island with my parents. And it sounds pretty glorious and romantic, and crystal clear water and warm, weather and blue skies and all that. My first trip out of the country to the Caribbean was to Haiti. And that was on a mission trip with my parents. And Haiti at the time, and possibly still, was the poorest country in the world. And quite a devastating place to go to, especially as a 12-year-old kid raised in middle-class South Alabama, white kid, if you didn't notice. And, not exposed to, just with kind of being raised in the public school system and just, kind of a different mindset. And then going down to this third world country and experiencing life outside of the bubble. And so for me, that was quite an awakening in a lot of ways. It came back very changed in terms of my world perspective, and that set me off on a journey of traveling many places around the world throughout the rest of my life, and in large part in order to continue to expose myself to diverse ways of living, diverse thoughts, and just not allowing myself to be insulated and into my own worldview, because it would be so easy to live a life like that, yet I think it would be so deprived as well too. So growing freedom for me is really freedom replacing ignorance. And so that's a huge part of what started there, and ignorance being unintentional, not an intentional kind of thing, but as a kid, obviously going there and gaining a sense of freedom of mind, and so then years passed, many different events and travels and everything, and then about 7 years ago, Minneapolis, Minnesota, I was working there for a week, and there was this huge Methodist church, and they had this lecture series, and they had Tom Brokaw and come and talk, and he's was the famous newscaster, and he wrote The Greatest Generation, which is an amazing book about where he went and interviewed World War II veterans and essentially told their story. And watching that talk, it was absolutely packed out, probably 1,000 people in this huge church, and it was standing room only, and I was sitting literally on stairs watching him, just enthralled the whole time. I walked away from that quite shaken, in the sense that I was once again, my ignorance came to light, and it came to light so much so that I realized as a middle-class American kid, middle-class American adult, I could go the rest of my life without knowing the story of our country, knowing all the sacrifice that went into the freedom that I rest upon and take for granted. And I also realized how prolific that is even now, so in the technology age, and how these kids can literally go their whole life without knowing anything about Vietnam, about hell, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War and what that was all about, and kind of all the sacrifices, and for better or for worse, the Civil War, and just our ups and downs and everything. Now, don't get me wrong, this didn't land me in a different mindset morally or politically. I'm still in a quite different camp than my conservative family and friends, but I think we share a lot of the same core values in terms of an appreciation and respect for what freedom is really about, and understanding those stories are so important. It's so important, become so important to me, that I began absorbing those over the years, and whether I don't care where the people ended up in life or who they voted for or anything like that, but just sitting and hearing their stories and having an appreciation for, again, the freedom that I rest upon. I didn't choose to be born in this state, in this country. It happened. it didn't happen to most of the world. And that's so vital, I think, for me to hang on to. So freedom replacing ignorance in my life. So that's how freedom has grown for me. Thank you.
No, it was 4:58 when you stopped. I was going to say that was perfection. And you said something, and oh yeah, that I'm sure you guys have all heard it. It's one of those things, you look like you won the lottery thing. I won the lottery the day I was born in the United States of America, you know. Yeah, I mean, I guess it might sound proud, but to me it sounds like, oh yeah, I didn't do anything to deserve living in this country. So yeah, that was really cool. And another thing, like, just talking about your parents taking on a mission trip, it's really, and then you were talking about how your beliefs or how your politics or whatever, lean a different way now, but they still lean to the valuation of humanity, basically, and treasuring those types of things. And it's like one of those things that our parents give us whenever they give us that solid foundation of a value for human life and treasuring other people's worth, no matter where they come from. If that's the basis right there, you can grow into any type of person, but you're always going to be the kind of person who, man, I wish I could get my thought exactly together to say it. A good person, basically, is what I'm trying to say. You don't have a good foundation and then grow up into a monster. I don't know. Most of the time. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about that. That was fabulous. I heard this song today. Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Does anybody have a thought about that? Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. Actually, this isn't the song I heard today. I heard Lee Greenwood's song today. Yes, thank you. Like, I could sing it for you, but I can't. I don't know why I thought freedom. It's okay, fine. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose. And if you wrote this, you don't have to comment on it, but anybody.
That's all you left me.
We could just have a line reading. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because whenever you're free to just be whoever you are, like without that fear of losing friends or losing family because you don't think the same way that they do or anything like that, that gives you the freedom to step out into who you were created and born to be. So that's what that means to me. Anybody else? You like that? Oh, yeah.
I built out a converted box truck. So, but it's like traveling in an RV, and like when you have such a little bit of stuff, you have this great freedom, and you don't, like right now in my house, if it burned down, I'd be quite upset. The dog's in there, but like, so yeah, I don't have a lot to lose when I just have this little bit of space, and I'm not all paranoid about it, I guess.
Oh, yeah. James says it's time to get rid of livestock. So... Speaking of, our next.
What, I get to speak about livestock?
Wait, you're not really the next speaker.
Oh.
So you can go.
Freedom from livestock.
James Fritchley, everybody. Five consonants, 9 letters altogether. Okay, we still have a few. I won't keep reading. So Ashley. Sorry. Ashley is our next speaker. Would you like me to introduce you, Ashley? Sure. Ashley is a former volunteer with the Historical Village. Yes. And that is all. So I know that you like history and you like being a part of something that shows the way people used to live, and that's all I know about you, Ashley. Take it away.
Thank you. All right. All right. So, wait, is the timer on?
I can start when you want.
All right.
Now I'm on the left. Hold on. Okay, all right. I can start whenever you want.
Okay. All right. It's probably going to be short. Okay, so I am a counselor, or intern counselor, and I am very much a perfectionist. And I was doing an intake the other day as my first one, and I just broke down after they left, full on, couldn't get it together. And you can't do that. So I had a meeting with my boss and just learning to say no and not do 12-hour days and, working on self-care. And so my thing is getting freedom from being a perfectionist and from the idea of disappointing others. Because as my boss said, there's no way I could disappoint them. So that's pretty much mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. That was fabulous. Yes, freedom from perfectionism. Who here, James, suffers from perfectionism? Or your spouse suffers from your perfectionism. But then I well, let me confess about myself. I'm one of those people who is about as far from perfectionism as you can get. I'm like, can I just put a cardboard box over there? I can just carry my clothes in a cardboard box. So why do I need a fancy suitcase? That's for fancy people. We just use them. I have shown up to birthday parties with presents wrapped in a paper bag. So yeah, but
That's pretty fancy. Not only a teapot, but 3 different kind of teas.
3 different kinds of teas. Make yourselves. No, I didn't do that. That was Elizabeth. Andrew, sorry. Yeah, and some kind of peppermint spoons. Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that, Ashley. I mean, that is a man, and it's okay to want things to be nice and to want things to be beautiful and so we're not saying you shouldn't work hard and do your best, but when that perfectionism just grinds you into a little stopping point and you can't function, that's when you've got to break free from that. Definitely. Let me read another paper thought. Freedom is just another word for choice. Nice.
That was me back up.
Shut up. I wasn't going to ask. I was going to ask if anybody else had a thought on that. You don't have to participate in having a thought on it, but if you have a thought. Okay. So we have another speaker coming up. And don't forget, you can sign up to still speak. So yeah. And we are. This is just feels like just a very relaxed version of our normal thing. And I love it. But Elizabeth is our lead gardener here. You kind of got introduced already.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
My husband, way too much. TMI for sure. But yeah, we thank him for that. So thanks for being here. I really do appreciate it, and we wouldn't have the freedom to do this if well, I guess we would, but it would be way less boring. So picking this topic
it really obviously, I assume it would be obvious. I just don't like those bright lights because I can't even see Scott. Anyway, I know I always complain about them, but so picking the topic, it really came because Veterans Day was a few days ago, and I thought it was really appropriate. And honestly, with every story that I've done so far, I really love this event, and I'm going to keep doing it, and we'll do 2 more in the spring. And I love it because I love the Moth, and I love real stories by real people, and I like the themes. And so in doing these and picking this theme, I thought, everything else that I've done, I'm not a storyteller, I'm practicing and I'm learning, but the other 3 or whatever I did, I really practiced, and I had stories in my head, and I wrote an outline, and I practiced in the car on my little voice thing, and I run it by Rob, and I would be at 8 minutes and go down to 5, and I really busted my rear end trying to prepare. I'm telling you, with this, I couldn't think of a story. I kept thinking of thoughts, but hard to think of a story with stakes. And Scott, I'm gonna thank you, and I can tell you why I thank people like you, and that's because I don't care how old you were. I was doing crazy things at that time too, and it sounded like it was a little bit crazy, your ideas of why you joined, or we're young, who knows what we're doing, but I thank you because I'm sitting here right now, and what I'm about to share, I couldn't do it without people like you that had a wild hair or a crazy moment, but you did it, and you committed, and you were there, and then you're honest, so I really like that because that's that freedom that we just talked about too, the honest, freedom to be honest that you voted for Bill, and I think that's kind of cool that we can do that in our country. And so I thank everybody like you. And there's a sign, I don't know if you know it, it's sign language. And I learned it with my students many years ago, probably after September 11th. And it's really the thank you sign in sign language. But if you're in an airport and you don't want to thank you, you can just kind of go like that. And I know a lot of people in the service don't even know that. So, but thank you for serving, because I didn't have the guts to do that. And I probably would be afraid, and I would never want anybody I know to serve. But we need you, and I don't like war, but I think we still need you. So I'm on the fence. So anyway, my story comes into play with Sarah, as actually you have kind of touched me. So when I first think about freedom, and I can't come up with a story, and this part isn't Sarah, but it's coming. After September 11th, years went by, and we thought and we talked and we thought and we talked. And every year I was a teacher, and we would celebrate or acknowledge it. And I remember telling my students, and I don't know what of all of this is true or not, but I know I heard it from somebody. So I would tell my students, especially when they were talking and I was reprimanding, you're lucky you're sitting in my class and that you're not a 4th grader learning to be a suicide bomber, because that's how I understand these people. And it's really hard to understand a 4th grader. Like, how could you be mad at somebody that's an adult and is a suicide bomber, because they were taught that since they were in 2nd or 3rd grade, especially boys. They didn't know. This is what they're taught. So I would tell my students that quite often, and I was middle school, but I heard it was around 4th grade. So then when it comes to my part of the story, every day when my students leave my classroom, I always had them say a blessing, or when I got to public school, it was a thank you. Why are they grateful? They couldn't leave until they said it. And when those students started coming through my doors and saying, I'm happy that I wasn't in suicide bombing class today, I was like, oh, good, I made an impact. And at least we're thinking, but that's a hard reality, right? So I come to Sarah. So Sarah, something that you wrote recently when you were in New Orleans, that's what kind of struck the little bit of a story that I have. And the freedom part of that is, you mentioned something about changing your attitude. And I don't even know if you wrote freedom to change your attitude, but as I read it, that's what I read. And I don't remember exactly, and I don't know if that's true for me when I was younger. It kind of was, but it wasn't. And I was angry, and I was mean, and I had these people that adopted me, and I would say things to them that were not appropriate. They would even say, you need to respect me because, and I would say stuff like, well, you need to earn my respect, stupid things, because I was living in their house. And I take that to another level, because the things that I said and did to my parents were so inappropriate and horrible that I think if I was in another country and I didn't have people fighting for my freedom, they could have cut my tongue out. They could have shot me. They could have put me on the streets, and they didn't. They weren't raised like that, but they didn't have the freedom to do that either. And I knew that. I pulled a gun on them once. I threw fingernail polish remover at my mom. I was horrible. I was angry, and this is all high school. This isn't even, I was wild and angry. They did take me to court. They had the right to do that. But in the back of my head, every time that I would do something, and I would run away, and then I would come home whenever I would want. Because I knew they couldn't kick me out. They didn't have the freedom, but I felt like I did because they had taken on this responsibility. So years go on, and you can imagine this is now a hard relationship, right, for all of us. My father has since passed, and we've since made lots of amends, but those things, like even Rob was talking about, some of that is still there, good or bad. Like, you can't make all of that go away. So years go on, and now I'm married to Rob, and my mom and I still butt heads, even though, my father had long passed, and she would say things that we would just both lock up and fight. And like, I don't know if I had the freedom to change my attitude. Somewhere along the way, I know I did. I went to treatment 3 times, my goodness. You would think some of that would stick in my head of how to change your behaviors and how to have the freedom to not open your mouth. His mom said to me one time, next time you fight, just stare at her. Well, please, I can't shut this. I couldn't shut it. I tried so hard, but then she would say, like, I had to say something mean. So now, fast forward to now, my mom's old, and she's got a little bit of dementia, and she's still not very nice all the time, and I'm still myself, I guess. But somewhere along the way, I found that freedom to shut up and to give her a pass. And it's a gift. It's a freedom, because sometimes I know I could say things, but I really haven't lost my patience with her in years. And even my brother's like, well, how do you deal with that? And I'm like, she just has a pass. I can't explain it. But I really liked that you wrote that. We do. And I think about that often sometimes when I'm frantic or whatever. I have that freedom. And I have part of that freedom because of you. And there's no doubt in my mind. I still have my tongue. And I'm telling you, if that was my kids saying that, they'd be lucky to have a tongue, because I couldn't control my freedom. And anyway, that's my little story. Thank you, and thanks for your inspiration and yours and everybody's. So thanks. Yeah.
That was fabulous.
First time I did it without rehearsing.
Yeah. The rehearsed one was great, and that one was great. So we all like it. I'm just gonna go straight into reading this.
Oh, and another one too. Yay.
Another sign up? Awesome. I think
I wish we had little sticks for our mini marshmallows. Mini sticks.
well the non-perfectionist is like, stick that in the fire and burn off that mold, and it'll be fine. You'll be good to go. I know, yeah, they are. So I think maybe there's a letter or a word missing, so I'm having trouble. Sometimes the most liberating freedom is one after a person battle in our own minds. Thank you. Okay. After a personal battle in our own minds. Oh, gosh, yes. Anybody ever had a battle in your own mind? No, none of you guys, just me. Okay. Yeah, that is so true. And then just that it really goes back to what you said, Elizabeth. It's like you don't know where that freedom came from, but it's something you fought out in your own mind and resolved on. That is good. All right. We have our next speaker. Chastity's going to speak. Oh, wait a minute. I almost skipped over Josh Jacobs. Josh is our recorder over here. I know you're from UWF. I don't know anything else about you. So he's a pinball guy. You should have a good crowd here. And if there's anything else you want to
Oh, no,
that's
that's
right,
all right.
because you're pinball pro. I remember that.
Yeah, that was my last story. Okay. I like the whole fireside thing, so I'm just going to sit here. So I joined the Air Force in 2001 in May. And, of course, 9/11 happened. And I couldn't... I'm autistic, and so, like, normal emotions don't really work for me. So I'm not really scared of anything. So I really wanted to go, I wanted to go to Iraq. And I got my opportunity when I was stationed at Kadena Air Base in Okinawa, Japan in 2005. And I was stationed in southern Iraq at a base called Talil, which is now an Army base called, or where it was called Ali Air Base. And during the Gulf War, the U.S. had just dropped tons and tons and tons of ordnance all over the place. So my job was a cable antenna guy. I climbed antenna towers and I dug trenches and ran communications lines. And each time we had to go out on a dig, we had to go to EOD, which is exploded ordnance disposal. And they had to sign off basically saying, yes, there was ordnance there, no, there wasn't. But because there was so much that was dropped during the Gulf War, we had to sign basically a waiver that says, hey, if you hit something while you're digging with the trencher, it's not our fault. And so there were many times where we'd be pulling up, bombs and just all sorts of different debris whenever we were trenching for this cable. And we were doing a dig on the base, and I was the only one that could operate the trencher. And so I've got my spotter behind me, and I'm sitting forward because the trenching part is behind me. So I'm cruising along right next to the tents. We weren't far from the chapel. And then all of a sudden my spotter just comes bolting right past me. And I'm looking around like, what the hell's going on? And then I jumped off the trencher, went over to him, was like, hey, what's the deal, man? And he's like, oh, there was an explosion behind you. I thought you had hit a bomb, and I just ran. And I was like, you didn't bother to tell me before you did? So he was just like down the way. And then, I was like, well, there's no way it could have been a bomb, or at least I didn't think it was. And all of a sudden, out of all the tents on the row, and there must have been about 30 of them, people started coming out of their tents. We hit the electrical line. One of the moments that I think about freedom when you're deployed and you're in the desert are things that you can escape from the atrocities of the things that are happening. A hot shower, a good meal, just a nice night when bombs aren't exploding around you. And air conditioning while you're in the desert in the summer is another thing that's highly coveted. And so that's what they were coming out for, because we had hit the electrical line and everybody, just about half of Tent City, had lost their AC. So it did get repaired. It took a couple of hours, but we did fix it. And but yeah, so that's my moment of freedom story.
So you kind of took the freedom away from everybody by taking the air.
Yes.
They were growing in anger.
Growing anger. That will be January's topic. And we'll have like 40 storytellers. Oh, wow. That's funny because it seems like we've been talking about this one a lot tonight. I have the freedom to change my attitude. Anybody like getting stuck in, and I mean, what I know, I'm trying to think, at least 2 stories talked about change in attitudes, and 3 that I can think of just like changing my attitude. And isn't that part of growing? Like the main part of growing is that ability to change, because, somebody who doesn't, something that doesn't grow, there's really only one option, is grow or stop growing, basically. And that's a euphemism for not being alive anymore, guys, in case you didn't catch that. So that's good. The freedom to change my attitude. I like that. Thanks for sharing that. And we have another speaker coming up, and her name is Chastity, and I don't know anything at all about chastity. So I don't know if you would like to whisper something to me or introduce yourself. Sure. Okay.
Hey, so I'm Chastity. Single mom extraordinaire. I teach at UWF, and I help to run the community garden on campus, and so that's kind of my connection. Yes, that's me. Yeah, and I like this fireside. Like Elizabeth, I was not going to share today. I shared it. I think it was the first moth. Wasn't Grow the first moth? I think. And that was the most terrifying experience of my life. Honestly, I spent a couple of months preparing and practicing and recording, like Elizabeth discussed. And I was like, well, I am definitely not going to do that again. Yeah. But I got really inspired. So I have a super short story. I just got really inspired listening to you guys. And I thought about when was the first time I really kind of internalized freedom. So I grew up extremely poor, public housing, welfare kid. Neither one of my parents graduated high school. It was not a pleasant a childhood. I grew up very quick. I had a younger brother that I started taking care of at a very young age, before elementary school. My mom ended up marrying someone from the Air Force, so I became what is affectionately known as a military brat. And with that came one of the most difficult parts of my life, because he turned out to be not a very nice person, but also one of the most liberating experiences of my life. So we first moved to Altus, Oklahoma. Nobody's heard of this place. We lived there a couple years, but then after that he got stationed at to the Azores. For those of you that have not heard of the Azores, they are essentially our gas station on the way to Europe. And it's a group of 7 islands, and there's an Air Force base on one of them. The Air Force Base Lodges Field is on a 7 by 11 mile island. And when we moved there, we lived off base. So we lived in this tiny community. I'll never forget the first day that we got there. These are Portuguese islands, predominantly Catholic. And the first day we got there and we were driving around, I was 10. No, I would have been 12 then. I was 10 and I was 12. And we're driving through this, cobblestone roads, this tiny little village. And I see this woman in all black, including a hat, and sweeping her front stoop. And, probably a big wart on her nose, but very stereotypical, like, the storybook witch. And I was like, oh my God, what is that? Come to find out she was a widow, a Catholic widow. It's not scary at all, but that wasn't really part of the story. Anyway, as a middle schooler, there wasn't a whole lot to do on a 7 by 11 mile island where you didn't speak the language. There was a roller skating rink, which we went to, almost every weekend. But one of the things you could do is you could rent a horse for $10 a day. And so you went to this little old guy had a ranch, and he had a couple dozen horses. And so me and a few friends would pay $10, and we'd get them all fed and brushed and everything. And we'd just take the horse out on this, and just explore this island, all day. As these middle schoolers, as a single mom, I can't even imagine letting my kid do that in this world, right? But that was the first, then afterwards you brought them back and you brushed them and fed them again and cleaned their little hooves out. But that was my very first kind of independence and feeling of freedom. And that's really stuck with me, and I'm so grateful. Despite the other terrible things that came along with that, I certainly would not give that up. So I would say get out there and explore. Spend the whole day without your phone, right? I know it's hard to imagine. And find that freedom again to unplug and plug into what's really important. Thanks.
Thanks. So this is ironic. We should have a Facebook group for phone-free people. kidding. But no. That was the joke. No, but that did make me think. I mean, seriously, I tried to hold out. I held out for a long time on getting a phone, a cell phone. I was like, a cell phone. It's in my pocket somewhere. Oh, okay, there it is. I held out for a long time, and the first one I got, because of what you're saying, because of what you were talking about with your phone, because I grew up like that with a horse, and I would just go in the woods, and it's fabulous. But so we held out for a long time on getting cell phones, and finally got one, and it was this little bitty phone. It was seriously this big, and the keys are like, I can't even. Good thing I have relatively small hands. I don't know, because otherwise you couldn't type on it. And I dropped it in the backyard, I remember, and the dogs ate it. That's how small it was. The dogs chewed it up. But, I mean, we don't go. And then I had a flip phone. And let me tell you about the flip phone. You don't care if you leave the flip phone at the house because you can't text on it. Seriously, you hit that button like 4 times. And if you miss the one you want, you go through it again. You can't get pictures on it. You can't look up anything on it. And all it can do is take a message for you. And I would leave it at home all the time because it didn't matter. I don't know. But now that I have a smartphone again, I pretty much need to know where it is. Yeah. Because I need to ask Siri how to get wavy hair to be curly while I'm driving down the street. I'm not sure why that can't wait, but it's one of those things. It's like I wish I could think of the proper word for it. It makes you do something you don't want to do. It's an addiction, but there's another word that I'm trying to think of as well. I can't. It's not coming. You mean like change your attitude about
Wanting to do it, wanting to use it, wanting to keep it, keeping it because it's expensive. They're expensive now too.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to lose this computer.
Yes. So we have another speaker.
And we're getting more wood.
Oh, yay. They're probably halfway on fire anyway, if you dug down to the middle. You blew it out. Anyway. Our next speaker is Andrew. Oh, wait, which Andrew? It's you, right? Andrew W. Yeah, come on up. Tell us a story about growing in freedom. Andrew's an artist and a poet, or Sarah the poet? Sarah's the poet. Sarah's coming. Oh, I thought you were coming up. So if there's anything else you would like us to know, I will let you.
No, I'll leave it open for now. This is totally inspired just by the enthusiastic inspiration of you guys telling stories, and this is unplanned, but so the theme is growing and freedom. So I grew up in Pace, Florida. It was very much a bubble, and I say it's a bubble because I had a lot of privilege, not privileges that I even recognized till far later. So there was a lot of freedom there. I'm very thankful for it. But we didn't travel. We didn't go anywhere. I didn't see the world. I didn't see experiences that were outside of my bubble. So when I was 17, I encouraged my best friend Ryan to take a trip with me. I had a Volkswagen van. It was a 1977 green van. It had a camper top. I fixed a bed in the back and it popped up, so it also had a bed up top. We graduated, and in June, we both took our graduation money, which was probably like $350 each, $350 each. We put it in the spare tire in the back because we thought that was the safest place for it in case we got robbed or mugged. We said we're going to the Grand Canyon. I hadn't been further than probably New Orleans in my lifetime. I wouldn't say I was a very original kid. I didn't really do much that was new or exciting. I was keeping up with the kid next to me. I was pretty vanilla. I had creative tendencies, but I had two brothers that were living a very traditional path. And I had parents that lived very traditional paths. I didn't know much. So this is a bold thing. It was my first moment of freedom where I was making a choice to do something on my own. I really didn't know what to make of it. We set out at like 4 a.m. so we could get up to a park to camp in Mississippi. That morning, my parents obviously were having a hard time when you take such good care of your kid. But my dad gave me a credit card at the last minute and like a 5-inch foldable knife for protection. I've never held a knife in my life. I put it in the glove box and we got pretty far in our trip. We went to the Grand Canyon. We had lots of experiences. We ended up going to California too. I have family that lives out there. That would be cool to see that coast. I had always this stereotype driving this van around. I thought it was the coolest thing. Everybody thought I was this hippie. It's funny because everybody thinks a hippie drives a Volkswagen van. And you have to have long hair and you have really free thoughts and you know, this, when I was that kid, like, it's like it was the first thing from a hippie. Ryan played it up and had like this long like wig. So when we drove on the interstate, his feet would be out the window and he'd have this long wig, and 60 miles an hour was our limit. We couldn't, don't you dare go over 60. We took turns driving. One of us would sleep sometimes. We took the interstate. God, why the fuck did we take the interstate? There's so many cooler roads. But I was 17, I didn't know any better. We got to Steamboat Springs, Colorado on the way back, and the engine started going, and I think this was like a long push for us. Like this was, I don't know, like 1 in the night. We pulled over in a parking lot. We actually had an atlas that had every Walmart on it in the country because we knew we could stay there. And by the second leg of our trip coming back, it was very impromptu, so Walmart atlas came in handy. We broke down, there was smoke, we spent the night. I remember looking in the phone book. There were still phone books attached to phones. And I found the only mechanic there. Steamboat was like a deserted town. Nobody was there. It was a winter place, you know, for skiing. It was July. The only mechanic I saw in town was Intergalactic Auto.
It's still there.
Holy shit.
It's still, we were there the year before last. It's still there.
So we got a free tow. Ryan's mom is an Allstate agent. She, of course, hooked us up with the insurance. That was his version of the credit card on our trip. We got a free tow. The guy said, "Do you know where you're going?" I said, "Intergalactic Auto." And he said, "All right." We go to this most beautiful country. It's probably the most beautiful country we had seen on this drive because it wasn't on the fucking interstate. It was beautiful. We end up on the top of this ridgeline. I feel like there's cows walking around. There's this old shed. The flatbed tow truck drops off the green van. And we're just kind of walking around in this empty garage area. There's tarps, there's all sorts of things. And the tow truck's already leaving. We don't even see anything intergalactic. And then Fred walks out. And Fred was Fred was the hippie that we weren't. There was like weird nude photos on the wall as art. And the first thing he did is pulled out a metal grinder. And that was the first time fear crept in, a metal grinder. And this whole exercise of freedom was kind of what Rob said. You're free to find your own ignorance. And we found lots of ignorances on this trip, and but it was the seed that planted the life that I'm on now, and the desires I have to do life alongside my wife in a mobile fashion, but also in a fashion very much outside of our bubble. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for being inspired. See, I told you guys that would happen. You sit around and it feels safer and safer to tell your story. So that's what we like, is just getting used to it. That was funny, like growing in freedom, like freedom to do, did you say do dumb stuff? Ignorance, yes. Freedom to, yeah. I went to Guatemala after college. My dad suggested that I go to Guatemala. My parents are very like, just whatever, just do something. And I got lost in Guatemala City. There was a bus strike, and the blonde girl from, I think she was from Pennsylvania, the blonde girl that I was with, we missed the last bus back to the children's home and wandered around the streets of Guatemala City for about an hour by ourselves. And we could speak Spanish, but not well enough for two 20-year-olds wandering around by themselves. And we actually it turned into the most amazing adventure, and we got into so much trouble when we finally got back where we were supposed to be. But it was just like waking up in some kind of little bodega. It was just, that only had cold water, because why did we need hot water? It was fabulous, and I learned a lot of wisdom. And I think that's one thing about growing freedom is after you get past the ignorance part, you get a whole lot of wisdom, hopefully. You don't do the same, like, anybody Anne of Green Gables fan? Okay. She goes, yeah, I do a lot of bad things, but I never make the same mistake twice. And I feel like that's on a loop in my head. I never do the same dumb thing twice. So that's good. But so you just grow through that. Would anybody else like to tell a story? Almost everybody has told a story. No? James? Do you have a story? All right. This is James Fritchley. He's my husband. He's taking the microphone away from me.
Oh.
Not my brother.
Well, Beckett already introduced me. I'm a perfectionist. Every day. It's so difficult. So, and I'm growing in freedom from my perfectionism. So that which my perfectionism is really, it puts a boundary, or that's a major barrier for me to get up here, because I feel like, hey, I have to prepare something. I can't dare get up here and when other people have prepared a story and knew what the theme was, and to come up here. So I thank you for the freedom to get up here and grow with you in storytelling, because I am not a storyteller. So, well, but officially, with the theme of freedom, and to think of that for my life, and some of the inspirations from your stories here, traveling the country, I was able to do that. The same thing, graduating from after I graduated from high school, was to hop in a caravan with some friends in a Volkswagen and go out and hike the Grand Canyon, stay on an Indian reservation, and so that was a freedom moment in my life, and I have been that person. I guess, more ignorant than brave of what the dangers that are out there. And I think part of that, when I think of freedom in my life, it's always been like symbolic of being the bicycle, as being a part of my freedom. As growing up, I was also a military brat, and so getting on a bicycle was my freedom to kind of get away from my family or to go and explore and to do. And so I just love the freedom of that, the freedom you feel like you're flying, you're free from gravity, you're actually gliding through space. And again, the freedom from, the only thing you have to have is to be able to refuel, get a peanut butter and jelly sandwich as a kid, and you can keep going all day. But even now into my adulthood, the bicycle is still a part of that. It's still freedom from so much of being dependent on a car and being dependent upon other so much infrastructure and being able to hop on a bicycle and go. If anybody's familiar with the author Grant Peterson, so I blame some of this more freedom drive to hop on a bicycle. He's the owner of Rivendell Bicycles and designs bicycles. He's a inspiring person out in California, and he wrote a book called Just Ride. And so he encourages people just to get on a bicycle, go explore, be free. And one of the things he encourages people to do is explore bicycle camping. So be able to, get a cheap bicycle, put a rack on it so you can carry a tent and a sleeping bag, and be able to hop on a bicycle and go. Just be able to go and spend the night out underneath the stars and go under your own power and to explore that. And so that's been something I've wanted to grow into. But my beautiful wife says, please don't do all these things that go and explore your own freedom. These things don't include me. So I have to figure out how to pull a trailer so I can pull Becca behind, or to get a bicycle built for two. So tandem bicycle, and I don't know, that's my freedom, but your freedom is only as good in expressing it as it is if it doesn't run over the freedom of someone else. So that's one of the things to consider. But in growing in that freedom is, how does it grow together with those around us? So with that, I leave you with my story. Thank you.
Wow.
I love the more ignorant than brave. And I was like, oh yeah, I've been there, done that. No, I want to explore. I used to draw. My favorite thing to draw as a child was, it was the heart family, and they were all shaped like hearts with legs and arms. They were one-dimensional, and I am not a talented artist. I'm not even an untalented artist. I draw stick figures, and that's how it works. But they were always going somewhere. They had their little heart caravan on wheels, and I think a horse probably drew the heart caravan along. But I also have a slightly post-apocalyptic mindset, so I have it planned out how we're going to get places whenever there is no infrastructure. So that's why we keep dogs, like fairly large dogs. We're going to train them to pull a cart. And the cart is going to have a beehive on it. The beehive is our secure place. If you want to keep your money safe or whatever, you just stick it in the beehive, okay? You got that? And what? If you want to stick your hand inside that beehive and get the money, I know what will happen, but So there's always that. What was it? We're not sure what to do with the cats and the chickens and the rabbits and so there's limits to traveling with animals and small children, I'm sure. But that was great. I've enjoyed everybody's story.
Yeah, I have something to say about yours.
Oh.
And really, Chastity and Becca have already heard it, but we had an event out where we have to be respectful.
Yeah.
So anyway.
I mean, and that's part of, valuing other people's space and worth and all of that stuff.
Did you scream really sorry? I'm sorry to the lady. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry.
So sorry. So we do have a couple of more paper thoughts. Freedom is power, and freedom is privilege. Yeah, that's freedom is a privilege. We keep talking about freedom, and it's a privilege that can be revoked. Freedom is to rid oneself of any preset limitations. Yeah, and I think we've pretty much all touched on that, and I like that. Anybody else have any thoughts on either of these? Do you want to add, subtract? Sarah? Sarah wants to tell a story. Sarah is a poet with a dog and a husband.
Why in that order?
Don't know Sarah and Andrew. They actually painted the radish on one side of the container, and then Sarah's words are on the other. So when you're leaving, we did put a light on both sides. Be sure to take a look at my water.
So this kind of goes along with the privilege bit too, but Andrew, my husband, and I are setting out to use our freedom in ways that really speaks to our heart, and that is connecting with communities through our art. And we did a collaborative art piece together a couple of years ago, not too long after getting married, and that was kind of the beginning of putting our hearts together through art. And it was a large 8-foot painting called Choices, and my words lived alongside this painting, but a line that came up in my head tonight from that writing is, we convince ourselves we're bound when we've never been more free. What are we doing with this freedom? And that question has been the biggest driver in the choices we've made over the past couple of years. That's a lot of flashing. Sorry, you're killing me. It's just like the little bit. It's just a little bit. No, sorry. I'm an easily overstimulated person with visual stuff. So one of those choices was us quitting our full-time jobs as an editor and a teacher. We did that right before we got married, and that was really the beginning of just using our privilege to make choices that aligned with what we wanted to do. And we gave up a house in St. Augustine that we were renting. We left a community. We lived on a sustainable farm to create a mural, put ourselves in a lot of uncomfortable situations to kind of get closer to ourselves and connecting with other people. And we came back to Pensacola after that and had intentions to be more mobile, but then our dog got really sick and we spent thousands of dollars to keep him alive. And the more we stayed here, the more we got back into a state of feeling like there's all these things that could keep us bound again, be it finances or any other life variable. But ultimately, we realize the thing that keeps us most bound is the expectations of others or roles that we play in other people's life that kind of keep us where we're at. So we could blame it on finances or other things in life of why we don't go after all the things we want to do. But we realized as we take these small steps to get where we want to go, that the biggest thing holding us back is the expectations that we feel others have on us, or the roles we play in others' life, or family, or just how we show up for people. So our biggest lesson in pursuing our freedom is, how do we not step on other people's freedoms, advocate for others, advocate for people who aren't privileged like we are, follow our hearts, but also not just do what other people want us to do, and not be a certain way to make other people more comfortable with our choices. So it's a constant unraveling, but we found it's not a reason to stay where we're at. And yeah, we're just more encouraged. Being here in the garden has been one of the most inspiring places since we've been back in Pensacola. And tonight's no exception. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All of you guys who are like, oh, well, I just have something I've been thinking about. This has been the best story. This story night. Yeah. Maybe it's the huddling around the campfire or not. But that, I had an incident years ago now. It was probably 17 years ago. I was doing something and had an opportunity to move into a different position. And the person I was working for at the time said, oh, no, please don't do that. I love having you stay here and do that. And so I was like, oh, you need me and want me. And so I didn't. And it's one of those things. It's like, and that can cause resentment towards that person when it was my choice. I chose to be flattered and to stay with what I was doing and not move on. But I try to think about that now whenever somebody tells me about an opportunity that they have to do something different or do something new. Like, I feel kind of cold-hearted sometimes, but I always try to say, that's amazing. You should totally do it. You know, because as much as I might like them to stay in my bubble, you know, there's another bubble, and that was great. You know, we've never been what we think we're bound when we've never been more free. Yeah, that's awesome. Do we have any more paper thoughts? No? I just wanted to check on that before. Say it again. Okay, already, so no more stories. Another last minute amazing story. I'm just going to put this down then.
I just seriously want to thank Becca. And I'm sorry if I said about, it's just really funny, the tea. But see, I'll be up at 4 a.m. going, and I've done that with them, because they like come and go, and I'm like, I shouldn't have said that. Should I call them? Should I text? Yeah, 3 and text them and apologize. But I know. My tongue is like, I've battled it. But this one is amazing. And my favorite thing about Becca, and especially doing this, is like, she's a connector. But as I've gotten to know her more, it's not just here. This is what she does. Like, she's a really great connector within the communities that I know. And in here, you can just see, this is kind of, if you don't know her, to me, this is kind of who you are. You've connected all of our stories. You have a story to think about, and you're just a great connector. So thank you so much for hosting, and I hope you'll be a hostess next year in 2020. So we'll have to, maybe you can pick some themes. So anyway, I thank you all for sharing. We do have a little prize. That's the part of the Story Slam, and that's the fun part. And I was telling Chastity, you know, at the poetry event, if you haven't been, they do it a little different. They pick people right when they come in, and they have these signs, and they hold up their judgy things, and then people boo at them for their, and so at first it was kind of like a nice idea not to put so much pressure on people, but I think the rubric is pretty clear, and everybody's a winner, and we know that. But it's fun to work for Innisfree and be able to give a little token of appreciation for people coming out. So we're happy to do that. Do you want to announce the winner? And we thank our judges too. Yes, thank you. Chastity and Yeah, and Andrew. I don't know, and one thing as Chastity comes up that we didn't mention, and we do need to, and I don't have that in my list for you, Rob, because Rob's kind of helping on that leg too. But we've been partnering a lot, and Dr. Greg Tomso is another one that's been partnering out with us, and we're trying to do things together with the community gardens and the Kugelman Honors Society, program is also funding this, and we're at a place where we're able to give our guests a little bit of a stipend, and we appreciate that. And they're supporting us, and Chastity's out here as a friend, I hope, but also really representing UWF as well. So we're super grateful for that partnership, and I've really enjoyed getting to know this one too. So yeah, and thanks to Innisfree, really, because we appreciate them being here. And upcoming events tomorrow, we have a movie called Love Song to Bobby Long, and this movie was written by I don't know his name, Mr. Capps, Grayson Capps' father, and Grayson's a local musician. Grayson has several songs in it, and I think Mr. Capps is still a little bitter because they changed a lot of it, but anyway, it's a great movie. It's John Travolta, Scarlett Johansson. I don't know my movie stars except for that one. And then on the 30th, we have a super exciting event, and I hope that y'all will be around because they have their dog Escher. But we're doing Grinch in the Garden. It's from 11 to 2 on a Saturday. And basically, we started off with Grinch because we couldn't have, I have issues with race. I really do. So we couldn't have a black Santa, a white Santa, a Mexican one, an Asian one. So we came up with the Grinch, and Andrew reminded me of the great Grinch idea. And so we're doing Grinch in the Garden, and Grinch in the Garden led to, we should have pets. So we're actually going to have a bully group come out, and we're going to have a pet adoption. And then we have the Escambia County Humane Society coming out, and they're going to be selling and talking about things. And anyway, it should be fun, 11 to 2, and you can get your picture taken with the Grinch, or you can bring any pet that you want, or whatever. We even have the little antler. We bought the little antler for any pet or person that wants to wear the little dog antler. Oh, I don't know. Really? Is it really?
I thought the same thing.
Well, I don't know, because you know what? We adopted 2 dogs from a bully rescue in Palm Beach County, so I naturally assumed it was bulldog. The slobbery. But I don't know. That's a really great question. I don't know. It is? Well, we'll have a pit bull adoption. Yeah. So anyway, we wanted dogs. So anyway, long story short, the one person that's helping us couldn't bring the dogs and do whatever she does, and so we have a dog rescue thing. So maybe somebody will go home for Christmas with a dog. And our cat just went off, so hopefully she's staying. Yeah.
Or a rabbit.
Or a chicken or a rabbit.
Oh, rabbit.
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks again. Big thanks to Josh for recording. That's another little benefit from UWF, the Kugelman Honor Program. Yes. So thank y'all again, and come back and see us.
All right. Yay.